My job tonight is to announce the 43rd Annual Best Picture Award.
The King of Cool died 42 years ago, and somehow, 42 years later, the world still can't look away from the man who gave us some of the best moments of Golden Age television. The obsession with Steve McQueen has taken on a new life, all because of what was just discovered in his long-locked storage unit. Since his death in 1980, the contents of that unit have sat untouched, sealed, and kept under strict lock and key. No one knew what was inside. No one dared speculate too far. And for decades, it remained one of those Hollywood mysteries people whispered about, but never truly expected to unravel. Until now, when the doors to that storage unit finally swung open, everyone present froze. What they found inside wasn't just surprising. It was the kind of discovery that instantly rewrites everything you thought you knew about a man like Steve McQueen. So, what exactly was hidden in Steve McQueen's locked storage unit? And why are they only opening it after all these years? Join us as we break down every twist, every reveal, and every detail behind this decades-old mystery. Inside Steve McQueen's untold origin story, the pain, the fury, and the fire that built a legend. Long before Hollywood crowned him with a name that still crackles in the air, the King of Cool, Terrence Stephen McQueen, entered the world in a small Indiana hospital on March 24, 1930. He was born into chaos before he ever took his first breath. His mother, Julia Ann Crawford, was young and overwhelmed. His father, William McQueen, a flying circus stunt pilot, vanished almost as quickly as he appeared. By the time Steve was 6 months old, the man who should have shaped him walked out of the picture, leaving behind a silence so deep it would echo through Steve's early years. He was of Scottish descent and grew up in a Catholic household, though nothing about his childhood felt sheltered or stable. His mother spiraled into alcoholism, something several biographers would later confirm, and the weight of raising a child alone proved too heavy for her. So in 1933, she handed him off to his grandparents, Lillian and Victor, in Slater, Missouri, a choice that became one of the rare gentler turns in his early life. As the Great Depression tightened its grip, the family moved again, this time to the farm of Steve's great-uncle Claude, and for a boy who had already tasted abandonment, this farm became the one place where the world finally stopped spinning. He later described Uncle Claude as a very good, very strong, very fair man, the kind of steady presence a boy could anchor himself to. Years later, he would still talk about that farm with the kind of warmth that told you he was talking about the only real home he ever knew. On his 4th birthday, Claude gave him a red tricycle and unknowingly lit the spark that would later define McQueen's life, that ferocious love for wheels, speed, danger, and control. It's almost poetic that the boy who grew up feeling powerless would find freedom in machines built to go fast. But childhood peace doesn't last long, especially in a story like his. At 8 years old, his mother reappeared, newly remarried and wanting her son back. Steve didn't want to leave the farm, but he didn't have a choice. On the day he left, Claude handed him a gold pocket watch inscribed with, "To Steve, who has been a son to me." It was a goodbye gift that carried more fatherly love than Steve had ever known. The life waiting for him in Indianapolis was brutal. Dyslexic, partially deaf from a childhood ear infection, and thrown into a home where his stepfather used his fists more than his words, McQueen simply couldn't adapt. At 9, after yet another beating, he ran away and survived on the streets, a child navigating a world that already felt like it had thrown him away. His mother tried again when he turned 12, calling him back to live with her and another new husband in Los Angeles. But nothing changed. He described this man as a prime son of a by-age, someone who beat both Steve and his mother without remorse. The rebellion that had been simmering inside him finally exploded. They sent him back to Claude's farm, but the damage had already taken root. At 14, without so much as a goodbye, He walked off Claude's land and joined a circus for a brief, wandering chapter. Then he drifted back to Los Angeles, slipping into gang life and petty crime. He stole hubcaps, mouthed off to cops, and pushed every boundary he could find. The police eventually caught him and dropped him at the doorstep of the same abusive stepfather, who beat him so severely he threw him down a staircase. Steve looked up and delivered a warning as cold as steel. If the man ever touched him again, he would kill him. His stepfather's response wasn't fear. It was paperwork. He convinced Steve's mother to sign a court order declaring the boy incorrigible. And just like that, Steve was shipped off to the California Junior Boys Republic in Chino Hills. This could have been another harsh turn. It wasn't. Inside those walls, Steve began to shift. Not suddenly, not magically, but slowly, painfully, honestly. At first, the other boys resented him. If someone didn't finish chores properly, the whole bungalow lost its privilege to go into town to see a movie. And if Steve slipped up, they let him know with their fists. He admitted he paid his dues, took his lumps, and learned the hard way that your actions affect everyone around you. Bit by bit, he toughened in a new direction. Not street tough, not runaway tough, something different, something steadier. He rose to the Boys' Council, the group that set the rules for everyone else, and the place that began as punishment became the very thing that shaped his character. Even after he left at 16, he kept coming back to talk to the boys who lived there, staying connected for the rest of his life. He knew exactly what it meant for a kid to feel like the world had written him off. At 16, he reunited with his mother again, this time in Greenwich Village. And in that restless, artistic New York neighborhood, he met two sailors in the Merchant Marine and signed onto a ship heading for the Dominican Republic. Once he arrived, he jumped ship entirely, took whatever work he could find, including a job at a brothel, and kept drifting. Texas, carnivals, lumber camps in Canada. He even got arrested for vagrancy in the Deep South and ended up on a chain gang for 30 days. But somewhere inside that whirlwind of mistakes and misdirection, Steve McQueen found the edge of himself and then pushed past it. In 1947, not yet 18, he asked his mother for permission to enlist in the U.S. Marines. And the Marines didn't get the legend. They got the troublemaker. The kid who went AWOL for 2 weeks to stay with a girlfriend. The kid who resisted arrest. The kid who got his rank knocked back to private 7 times. But the Corps is built to break boys down and rebuild them with steel instead of fear. And eventually, Steve stopped fighting everything around him and started fighting for something inside himself. That shift showed up in the moment that changed everything. During a dangerous Arctic training exercise, he saved the lives of 5 Marines by pulling them out of a sinking tank just seconds before it dropped into icy water. From AWOL troublemaker to hero, Steve McQueen's life always seemed to swing between extremes. He served honorably until 1950 and later said the Marines made him a man. For the first time in his life, he felt direction, purpose, a platform to jump from. And jump he did, making a way for himself. With help from the GI Bill, McQueen returned to New York in 1952 and stepped into the world that would finally claim him. He enrolled at Sanford Meisner's neighborhood playhouse, where he learned to channel the raw emotion he'd carried since childhood. He trained under Stella Adler and Uta Hagen, absorbing techniques that sharpened the edge he already naturally had. His first spoken line on stage was a single Yiddish sentence, "All is lost." It's almost eerie how perfectly that line fit the man he had been up until that moment. But off stage, he leaned into the other thing that had defined him since that red tricycle: speed. He bought motorcycles, a Harley and a Triumph, and raced them on weekends in Long Island City. He won consistently, pocketing around $100 every weekend, proving he wasn't just a hobbyist with a need for adrenaline. He had genuine talent. His early acting career grew piece by piece. Small roles in Peg O' My Heart, The Member of the Wedding, and 2 Fingers of Pride, and eventually his Broadway debut in A Hatful of Rain in 1955. Hollywood eventually pulled him west, and he moved to Echo Park, chasing the dream he wasn't fully sure he deserved. But Hollywood noticed him quickly. A two-part appearance on Studio One put him on the radar of manager Hilly Elkins, who believed B-movies were the perfect playground for Steve to cut his teeth. And he did. Somebody Up There Likes Me, The Blob, Never Love a Stranger, and The Great St. Louis Bank Robbery. Each step pulled him closer to that breakthrough moment. Television made him a star. He appeared on Tales of Wells Fargo, then landed the role that changed everything. Bounty hunter Josh Randall in Wanted, Dead or Alive. That rifle holster hybrid called the Mare's Leg turned him into the TV anti-hero audiences didn't know they were waiting for. He brought mystery, danger, and a kind of simmering distance that felt entirely his own. Soon after, Frank Sinatra gave McQueen a life-changing boost by replacing Sammy Davis Jr. with him in Never So Few. And from there, director John Sturges pulled him into The Magnificent Seven. McQueen's subtle scene-stealing moves, twirling shotgun shells, adjusting his hat, polishing his gun, infuriated Yul Brynner but electrified audiences. Steve had the thing you can't teach: presence. Then came The Great Escape, the motorcycle, the chase, the leap. Even though Bud Ekins performed the actual jump, Steve became the face of one of the most iconic moments in cinema history. And with that, the crown fit. He wasn't just an actor anymore. He was a phenomenon. But parallel to the career that made him mythic was the other life he never let Hollywood take from him: racing. Off-road, on-road, in the dirt, on the track, he lived for the hum of an engine. He raced minis in Britain, fought through the 12 hours of Sebring with a cast on his foot, and poured his soul into Le Mans. He rode as Harvey Mushman in off-road competitions, threw himself into Baja races, and even helped fund the legendary motorcycle documentary On Any Sunday. By the early 1970s, he wasn't just a movie star. He was an American symbol of danger, rebellion, grit, and cool wrapped into one man. And yet, every triumph he ever tasted grew from the same roots: abandonment, hunger, bruises, rebellion, and survival. Steve McQueen didn't climb to the top. He fought for it, he bled for it, and he turned every scar into fuel. Inside Steve McQueen's fortune, the hidden cars, secret purchases, and final ride of the King of Cool. Steve McQueen didn't just dominate Hollywood, he shaped it. In the 1960s and 1970s, he wasn't just another leading man. He was a cultural force, the kind of star who could stare down a camera and make it blink first. By the time he died, his net worth sat at $30 million, the modern-day equivalent of about $100 million, and every dollar of it had a story behind it. His film paychecks were the kind of numbers actors today brag about. In the mid-1970s, McQueen was the highest-paid actor on the planet, and when he pulled in $12 million for The Towering Inferno in 1974. That would equal roughly $66 million today. That wasn't just success, that was dominance. And with that kind of money, McQueen didn't waste time. In 1979, he and Barbara Minty, the woman who would become his third wife, bought a 15.5-acre ranch in Santa Paula, California, a quiet stretch of land tucked about an hour and a half from Los Angeles. It wasn't Hollywood flash, it was private, grounded, and exactly the kind of place a restless soul would retreat to. They married inside the living room of that ranch in 1980. The property carried a certain intimacy, but it also had a surprise: a 4,500-square-foot hangar. McQueen filled it with the things he cared about most: his cars and motorcycles. It didn't hurt that the Santa Paula airport sat close by, making it easy for him to keep his beloved Stearman Model 75 biplane just steps from home. But what no one could have predicted was how valuable his collection would become long after he was gone. McQueen wasn't buying toys. He was building a legacy. The man owned around 130 motorcycles and dozens of show-stopping cars. Ferraris, Porsches, Jaguars, machines that weren't just fast, but storied, machines that matched his own myth. To fans, McQueen was a movie star, but to collectors, he became something else entirely, the patron saint of petrolheads. His collection still influences the market even now, decades later. And ahead of multiple auctions featuring pieces from his legendary garage, the world keeps circling back to the question that follows him everywhere. How did one man end up with a collection that outshines entire museums? Let's walk through some of the crown jewels. 1946 Indian Chief was the bike that started it all. This was McQueen's first motorcycle, the gateway drug. By 1951, he had finally scraped together enough money to buy what he called a battered cycle with a sidecar, proudly riding it through the village as if it were brand new. He loved that bike. Not everyone around him did. He once told the story of how his girlfriend at the time confronted him with an ultimatum. The bike, or her. McQueen didn't hesitate. She walked. The Indian stayed. Years later, the same battered cycle was fully restored, polished into a piece of history rather than a memory. And now, it sits as one of the purest examples of the machine that sparked his lifelong obsession. If the Indian lit the fire, the Triumph fed it. In The Great Escape, McQueen tore across the screen in what looked like a German BMW. But in reality, it was a British Triumph TT Special 650 dressed up in military disguise. He pushed that bike so hard that the stuntmen chasing him couldn't keep up. McQueen took over their jobs, chasing himself in the film using clever editing. That wasn't ego, that was instinct. He knew the rhythm of the machine better than anyone. When people talk about cinema's greatest chase scenes, they always circle back to Bullitt. McQueen made that Mustang roar through the streets of San Francisco until the car literally fell apart under his hands. The door handles came off, the shocks blew, and the steering nearly quit. Production used 2 Mustangs for the film. Only one survived. A private collector bought it and refused to sell it back when McQueen tried to track it down years later. Some objects outgrow their original owners. This was one of them. And even McQueen's wardrobe from the film has reached mythic status. His tweed Bullitt jacket once hit an auction block with an estimate close to $800,000. That's the kind of value nostalgia has when it's attached to a legend. To racing fans, Le Mans is sacred. McQueen filmed it like a documentary disguised as a movie. Raw, loud, and dangerous. The real Porsche 917K used in the film eventually landed in Jerry Seinfeld's collection. But the set needed more than one hero car, so multiple replicas were created, many of which were sacrificed in crash sequences that were a little too convincing. Even the watch he wore in the film, the Heuer Monaco, became a collector's prize. One of the 6 pieces used during shooting sold for a jaw-dropping $2.2 million. Out of all the glamorous toys McQueen ever owned, the one that hits the hardest is the simplest, a Chevrolet pickup camper conversion. He bought it impulsively, as he often did. He and Barbara passed a farm worker driving it one day, and McQueen immediately turned the car around, wrote a check, and claimed it. It was nothing fancy, just a solid old truck with character. But in his final days, that truck became the one vehicle he relied on most. It was the last ride he ever took. Years later, it appeared at auction, carrying the quiet weight of those memories with it. McQueen's collectibles continue to break records long after he's gone. His 1937 Crocker motorcycle sold for $276,000 in 2006. His 1963 Ferrari 250 GT Lusso Berlinetta pulled in $2.3 million in 2007. And his watches, those were a world of their own. McQueen owned dozens, and during his lifetime, he was closely tied to Heuer. The partnership didn't end with his death. Tag Heuer still pays his estate today to use his image. When one of his Monaco watches resurfaced, the same model worn in Le Mans, collectors didn't hesitate. It soared to $2.208 million. Not for the watch, but for the man who made it iconic. Steve McQueen left behind more than films, more than quotes, more than images frozen in grainy stills. He left behind pieces of himself, machines he touched, drove, raced, broke, and rebuilt. He built a collection not for show, but for passion, and somewhere along the way, those passions turned into artifacts, relics, memories you can put a price on but never fully measure. Decades later, Hollywood still remembers him. Collectors still chase him. The market still bends around his legend. Because McQueen never belonged to one world. He straddled all of them: film, speed, rebellion, and elegance, and somehow made them speak the same language. That's why the story keeps going. That's why the auctions never end. And that's why the king of cool still owns the road, even long after he left it. Steve McQueen's Women, the dark, twisted, real story Hollywood tried to hide. When Neil Adams ran straight into Steve McQueen on Broadway at 23, she didn't know she was walking right into the kind of plot twist most people only see in movies. She'd grown up in the Philippines, worked her way into rehearsals at Carnegie Hall, and on that night, she just happened to turn around and lock eyes with a man so handsome she had to look twice. The wild part? He turned back too. That moment, small, accidental, almost innocent, became the spark of a love story that would stretch across decades, through marriage, divorce, new partners, and even his death in 1980. She could still remember the early sweetness of that beginning. He leaned in with that quiet confidence of his and told her he'd take care of her. "I will always take care of you," he had promised. And for a while, she believed it, because promises feel real when the person making them looks like they stepped straight out of a movie reel. But that same movie reel charm is exactly what turned her on the night she felt the cold steel nozzle of a pistol press against the side of her head. In that moment, all the illusions she had built around him cracked. She realized she wasn't the exception. She was simply the latest woman caught in the orbit of a man who lived his life like one of his on-screen anti-heroes, except with far darker impulses. Beneath the stardom and swagger, there was the real Steve McQueen, controlling, vicious, and dangerously unstable. They'd met in the 1950s, not long after her move to the United States from the Philippines. They married fast and had 2 children, Terry Leslie, born June 5, 1959, who sadly passed in 1998, and Chad, born December 28, 1960, who later passed in 2024. But the growing family didn't soften the shadows around him. Neil soon learned that her husband's appetite was bottomless. Affairs weren't occasional lapses, they were the routine. He had addictions stacked on addictions, including a heavy cocaine habit that fed his paranoia. One night, McQueen wanted to get high and dragged Neil into the spiral with him. She refused at first, trying to set a line he would not cross, but he pushed. He told her he didn't want her feeling bad, and insisted some coke would make things feel better. She eventually gave in and instantly regretted it. The more he snorted, the more unhinged he became. His mind spun itself into knots, and suddenly he was firing off questions about whether she had been unfaithful. Exhausted and fed up, she teased him with a biting line, telling him his wasn't the only golden cock in the West. It was sarcasm, a last defense, a way to hold onto a sliver of power. Then she twisted the knife further by telling him the man she was supposedly sleeping with was an Academy Award winner. That was all it took to send him into a nose-sniffing rage. He stormed out, came back trembling with fury, and pulled a gun from his pocket. He shoved it against her right temple, pushing his body into hers with manic intensity. His voice dropped to that terrifying whisper, promising she'd better confess or she'd never live to see him die, adding that he would track down the mystery lover no matter what. Stories like these didn't come out until after McQueen's death, but once they did, they formed a pattern. The way he treated women had less to do with love and everything to do with ownership. He could sleep with whoever he wanted, even prostitutes. But the women in his life had to remain loyal down to their last breath. When Nayla became pregnant, not long after the gun incident, his paranoia spiraled again. He refused to believe the baby was his, and pushed her, mentally, emotionally, and relentlessly, into getting an abortion she didn't want. She was so broken by his interrogations and threats that she fled from France to Britain just to go through with it. Years later, she wrote that, as much as she wanted another child, there was simply no way she could survive both the abuse and a pregnancy at the same time. And Nayla wasn't the only one who lived through this pattern. When McQueen met Ali McGraw on the set of The Getaway, their chemistry sparked instantly, even though she was married. At the time, she was riding high from Love Story, one of the biggest films of the decade. But once she married McQueen in 1973, the old cycle repeated itself. He banned her from taking romantic roles. He controlled her work, her time, and her movements. She later described their relationship as a mix of intoxicating passion and total chaos, the kind where love and destruction sit right next to each other. They battled addiction, they cheated on each other, and they fought in ways that left bruises emotionally, if not physically. In her memoir, she confessed that from the moment he stepped into her world, she was obsessed, like he had swallowed all the air around her. She believed he'd eventually leave her. She regretted deeply that the two of them never got the chance to sit down years later, sober and older, and clear the wreckage between them before his death at 50. She insisted she wasn't a victim, but she admitted there were days that were wonderful and days that were ghastly. And that contrast alone tells you everything. After Ali came Barbara Minty, his final wife. They met after McQueen saw her in an ad, a photo that caught his attention enough for him to arrange a meeting in 1977. Their relationship didn't have the explosions of the earlier ones. He was older, slower, a man whose fire was starting to burn out. They married in 1980 and moved to California, where she stayed by his side until the cancer finally took him just months later. Barbara never remarried. For her, that chapter was final. Steve McQueen left behind a legacy of cool. The bikes, the cars, the movies, the myth. But behind that myth were women trying to hold themselves together while weathering the storms he brought into their lives. Some loved him, some feared him. All of them survived him in their own way. What they found in Steve McQueen's unit left everyone speechless. The king of cool may have died 42 years ago, but the world still can't shake its fascination with him. Steve McQueen had that rare kind of presence, the kind that doesn't fade, doesn't soften, and doesn't disappear with time. And now, all these years later, his name is suddenly back in the spotlight, all because of what people found when they stepped inside the Malibu retreat he once used to escape Hollywood's chaos. Back in the 1970s, McQueen was one of the highest-paid actors alive, bouncing from Bullitt to The Great Escape to the Thomas Crown Affair like a man who simply couldn't miss. But even legends get tired of the spotlight, and when McQueen needed to disappear, he slipped away to his beach house in Malibu, a place so private, so tucked into the bluffs, you'd never know a superstar was hiding there. For decades, that house remained a quiet mystery. People knew it existed, sure, but no one really knew what was left behind, what survived the chaos of his career, or what pieces of his life still lingered after he was gone. When the property resurfaced on the market, the doors finally opened, and what they found inside instantly reignited the world's obsession with Steve McQueen. This wasn't just a beautiful Malibu estate. It was a time capsule. Panoramic decks, a secluded stairway down to the beach, hidden corners where he walked the sand undisturbed. Every detail told a story of the man behind the legend. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't over the top. It was raw, human, unmistakably Steve. The house, with its California chic interiors and breathtaking ocean views, captured the private life of a man the world only glimpsed on the silver screen. And in that quiet, sun-drenched space, The King of Cool still made his presence felt, decades after his death. What are your thoughts on Steve McQueen's collections? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.